All right, we are back here on Healthcare Experience Matters. Today, we are joined by Kathleen Shanley. She's the founder and CEO of Statice, an official member of the Forbes Coaches Council as well. And of course, Robert Eisinger. He is a chief academic and administrative officer here at the Healthcare Experience Foundation. And I'm going to let them take it away because we want to talk about this interesting dynamic that happens in healthcare leadership or management or both, where you are a colleague of someone for a long time or a group of people, and then there comes a day where you become their actual boss. It is a very common occurrence that we know about, and I'm going to let Robert take it away and introduce himself, and then Kathy will do the same, and they will lead this discussion from there.
Thank you, Casey, for the intro. Again, my name is Robert Eisinger. I'm the Chief Academic and Administrative Officer at the Healthcare Experience Foundation. It's a pleasure to have Dr. Shanley with us. There are so many things I want to cover in so little time, both about colleagues being a boss, but also about leadership and your role. So let's just start, Dr. Shanley, with you've got 90 seconds or so. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you're from, and how you got to be a coach who has a keen understanding of colleagues as bosses.
Please call me Kathy. Only my mother calls me Dr. Shanley, and it's usually to her girlfriends. So I am a certified corporate coach, but I come from a background of 30 years being in the C-suite for national medical associations, as well as being a deputy director in an agency for the federal government in healthcare. Why did I end up that place? I walked into an organization one time, inherited a bunch of staff that weren't getting along, and they were pretty toxic to each other. And I entered a leadership training program, and then the rest is history. Went into coaching from there. So recently retired from my full-time gig working in the healthcare field, and now I do corporate and leadership coaching and team development full-time. And I'm so glad to be here today.
Thank you, Kathy. So let's connect into this notion of coaching and coaching in the medical community. How is it different than, let's say, coaching in C-suite for the automotive industry or the airline industry or the insurance industry?
Yeah, so I would make the argument or make the case that it's not that different because all of these organizations have people. And maybe the pressure is different. Maybe the demographic is different. For instance, you may have more males than females. You may have more people of a younger generation than an older generation. But at the end of the day, we're all people. And so I would make the case that whether you are in construction or the healthcare field, as a manager, your job is still to have a vision and lead people.
Offline, before we went on the air, you mentioned in passing the book, The Business of Friendship.
Yeah.
Tell us why this book is of such interest to you and why friendship within and among colleagues is so important.
Yeah, so that book, The Business of Friendship by Shasta Nelson, just came out within the past year. And so the reason I was smiling is the first thing I said to you is when I read this book, it reminded me of the fact that friendship shouldn't be the F word in your workplace, right? Friendships are super important to the business. And one of the things the author talks about are some studies that say that if you have friends in your workplace, you have stronger engagement, you have more trust. And in addition, if you have a best friend at the organization, you're 7 times more likely to have that engagement. And we all know from the work of leadership that if you have more engagement, people are more open, more accepting to feedback, more accepting to brainstorming in a productive way. And then you're more able to meet the business outcomes. So why not have friendship in the workplace?
Well, let's argue with that a little bit.
Okay.
And say friendship's great, but sometimes your friend becomes your boss.
Yeah.
Sometimes that conversation might have to be a difficult conversation. And we at HXF kind of do these certifications about physician leadership and a whole series of programs designed to improve people's communication skills. So let's talk a little bit about when your friend, colleague becomes your boss.
Yeah. So what I typically see is people are concerned about fairness, people are concerned about being able to provide feedback to someone that is their direct report that formerly was simply a colleague. You see things around, what if I want to leave? What if they want to leave? What will happen to our friendship? And so one of the things that I love to talk about is knowing that you're being promoted, knowing that you're having a different relationship, have a discussion and be super transparent of what's going to happen next. For instance, do some what if scenarios. What if I see something and I have to provide feedback? What would feel right to you? What would feel right to me? What if you hear something and would I want it shared? What types of things would I want shared? So really just talking to them about this relationship has changed. And so how are we going to show up for each other next? And then what are we going to do if we notice that other employees are becoming concerned about things like, favoritism?
I was going to say, do you think it's vital for that conversation to occur proactively and early?
Yeah.
I can imagine once somebody's promoted, they already know that the two of us are friends. If you get promoted, now you're my boss. It won't take very long for people to kind of talk around the water cooler and say, wait a second, Robert and Kathy are buddies.
Yeah.
Robert's safe. Robert's protected. Robert has a rabbi. We know the expressions, right? So what can be done, and what communication skills and techniques might you suggest both to Robert and the future boss about how to mitigate those concerns, both among the colleagues and between the two parties?
Yeah. So to answer your first question, I think that conversation should happen early on. And it could happen where you could talk about what if one of us becomes promoted, right? It also can happen right after that promotion is announced. I think waiting until something happens and then having that conversation might be a little too late, because there might be emotions involved, whether it's excitement or frustration. But having it while tempers are calm and everyone's feeling very good about the relationship is a good time to have that conversation. The other thing is that if you are the supervisor and the person that's being promoted, being super intentional about how you show up. And favoritism can work in an opposite way. Sometimes people overcompensate. And I think about the case of someone that I worked with at where Casey and I used to work together. There was someone that I was friends with. I was always their direct report, and there was a running joke that this person was my favorite. And so at times my inclination was to overcompensate and almost ignore the person. That's not fair either. And so being super intentional that you are friends with this person, however, it's not impacting my decisions, because at the end of the day, when you get promoted, and Robert, you know this when you're teaching leadership, it's being super intentional about the fact that you are now working for the team and you're working for the organization. You're not working for yourself, and you're not working for this person to support either of your goals. It's about what's best for the team and being intentional of who's the right person for whatever task or project is out there.
I am so grateful you mentioned that word intentional and intentionality, because we at HXF, in our communication development and in our CARES program, we are always talking about having people both be attentive listeners and be extremely intentional in what they say and how they express their nonverbals as well as their verbals. So that's a part and parcel of kind of who we are and what we do and what we believe. And it's just great to hear it reinforced.
And Robert, if I may, I just wanted to thank you. So another thought that came up as you were talking is, so how about the person that is now being supervised by their friend? Or how about the person, so they're having part of the conversation, but what about the other people on the team who think, oh, well, Kathy's favorite is this employee over here? Well, that person actually could be making stuff up in their mind, and it can be completely untrue. But what they do have an obligation is they probably want to discuss it with their supervisor and say, I'm noticing this. If they're going to have that conversation, there's a really great framework they could use. I like to call it COIN. I don't know who invented it, but it's pretty popular in the coaching world. And they should state their facts first. What are they seeing? What are they observing? They can share their opinion. So share their facts, share their observations, and then talk about the impact, whether it's the impact on them, the impact on the team, the impact on the business. And then the N in COIN can be, what's next? What am I noticing? It could be whatever you want it to be. but having a conversation to say, this is what I'm noticing, to clear up anything that you might have made up in your head. So
this is great. I got a closing question. That is, there are certain people out there, they're listening now, they're watching now. They're young in their profession. They're really good at what they do. They're great nurses. They're great physicians. People whisper in their ear and say, you're a future leader. You're going to be heading up this team. You're going to be a department chair. You're going to be the chief. You should consider yourself a future chief nursing officer.
Yeah.
What advice do you have to him or her?
Yeah. So set a goal, figure out why you want it, and then what it's going to take to get there. When I work with clients, that's pretty much where they start, is they have a vision for their future. The other thing is that it's super important to, much like friendships, figure out the power players in your building and build connections with them, learn from them. But it's a two-way street. You're learning from them, and then you share with them perspectives that you might have. So it makes it a great relationship. And then figure out what it's going to take to execute it. What's going to get in your way? What are you going to do when things get challenging? And just go for it. And then, of course, this is the first week and second week of May is really dedicated to International Coaching Week. So hire a coach, someone that can be an accountability partner, or find a mentor that can help keep you accountable, or find a friend.
Thank you so much. I want to just, what about the person who doesn't know if he or she wants to be that leader? They're whispering to him or her and saying, I see you as a future leader, but they're not sure they've got it, perhaps because of humility, perhaps because of imposter syndrome, perhaps because they're just so busy and they're so good at what they do. Do you have any advice for them about when enough people say you're a future leader, but you're not sure if you want it? Your first answer was set the goal, but the pre-goal might be, do I even want to do this? And how do I know if I'm capable and equipped?
Yeah,
we're in the business of developing leaders at HXF. So I want to hear your perspective.
Yeah, so you could set a goal for not now, status quo. I'm going to table this till later. I'm going to take a hard pause, right? But on the other hand, if you wanted to figure out whether this was a goal, one of the ways to do that is start with your values. Think about what's really important to you, and think about what's not important to you. And then when you think about what's important to you, whether it's independence, creativity, leadership, or maybe it's independence, seeing what your values are may lead you in one direction or another. If you're someone who likes independence and autonomy and working alone, maybe you don't want to be the chief of managing people. You don't want to be a people manager. Maybe you want to be a project manager. If you're someone that enjoys, for instance, I love interpersonal relationships. I love communicating with people. I thrive in brainstorming. And so for me, it was an easy choice to decide I wanted to move up into the C-suite. And then once I was there, I wanted to stay there. So hopefully that gives some tips.
Well, that's great. And I thank you so much. As many of the listeners know, we at HXF have a lot of certification programs about compassionate leadership and physician leadership. And it's great to hear a perspective like we just heard from Kathy. I'm still tempted to say Dr. Shanley with all those credentials, who also kind of, your responses very much complement our mission, vision, and values. So with that, I just thank you so much, Dr. Shanley, Kathy, for your insights and your thoughtful perspective on leadership, especially as it relates to colleagues and bosses.
Yeah, I want to reiterate one more time what Robert was just telling us about, and that is the upcoming Certificate in Physician Leadership certificate program from HXF. We will include a link to that. Spring and fall cohorts are now enrolling, so we'll include a link to that in the description of today's podcast. You've been listening to Kathy Shanley. She's the founder and CEO of Statice. And of course, Robert Eisinger. He is our Chief Academic and Administrative Officer here at the Healthcare Experience Foundation, healthcareexperience.org for more on that. Thank you both so much for your time today.